Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. Today's episode offers some new takes on a familiar topic, the roller coaster-like dynamics of ransomware attacks. One of the latest updates comes via Kovrr in their Ransomware Threat Landscape report for the first half of 2023. The firm found that while the number of reported ransomware attacks was down, manufacturing remains atop the most attacked sectors, with nearly 1 out of every 5 ransomware attacks focusing on the industrial sector, and nearly 60% of targeted companies registering less than $50 million in annual revenues. The report also found a collection of the usual suspects amongst the most active ransomware as a service groups. With Black Basta, Black Cat, Lockbit, and Royal leading the way, the top 10 bad actors accounted for 87% of attacks during the first half of 2023, and the top 3 groups, Lockbit, Black Cat, and Clop, accounting for more than half of all attacks. Just as concerning as the high-profile target that manufacturing represents is that numerous ransomware attacks were attributed to zero-day and one-day vulnerabilities. This means that in several instances, the bad guys still know more about what's going on within your OT system than you or your technology partners. This is supported by data from Fortinet showing that the detection of ransomware attacks has dropped from 22% 5 years ago to 13% in the first half of this year. Fortinet speculates that this decrease in detection doesn't indicate that ransomware activity is decreasing, but that these attacks have become more concentrated, more sophisticated, and capable of evolving more quickly to exploit some of those aforementioned vulnerabilities. To help us dive more deeply into these new and constantly changing ransomware dynamics is the author of the aforementioned report, Guy Proper. Guy is a data analyst at Kovrr, a leading provider of cyber risk management solutions, and our guest for today's episode. Guy, thanks for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. So, really got a lot of wonderful information out of the Ransomware Threat Landscape report that you put out, that you were the author of. Just kind of curious, in going through that, there was a ton of data, but was there anything that kind of stood out or maybe even surprised you in putting that together?
Actually, yeah, there were like one or two things that surprised me as I was analyzing the data and writing the report. The first thing that was really surprising was that the top actors, we found the top 10 actors for the first half of 2023. So they were responsible for a really large percentage of attacks during that period. It was like, I think we had 87%. So that was really surprising. I didn't think the landscape was so centralized. And the second thing that relates to that is that the top actor, which was Lockbit, it had like a huge amount of attacks. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like 30-something%.
Wow.
Just one actor. So that was really surprising. The other thing that was surprising is that there are the most active groups. They're actually active for a very long time. We profiled that by checking their first known attack from our data and their last known attack, which could be at the time of the report. And I don't remember the average time, but there were many groups with a lifespan of 2 years. I think there was one with even 3 years. And that's surprising because there's more government and law enforcement activity around ransomware. So I didn't think that one group could stay for so long active, but I have a thought about this. Maybe the groups keep the same brand.
Yeah.
But they're actually different people. I don't know, but
okay.
that might be like an option.
No, it's interesting. Some of those names that were brought up as sort of the top 10 or the leading attackers, definitely we're familiar with those folks in the industrial sector. Lockbit in particular, they've been a nemesis for some time. Was there anybody else sort of on the report that caught your eye as sort of a fast mover, somebody who's been doing more lately?
Well, there are some names that have been around for a while, and also they have been very, very active. One group is Clop. Yeah. That's been active for a very long time, and they're still like really, really active, attacking a lot of companies. And there are newer actors which are have been really active in the first half of this year. Play and Royal Ransomware, they come to mind.
Absolutely. Royal's another one we're definitely all too familiar with here on the industrial side. So, ransomware's had sort of it's almost like a roller coaster type of trend. In the industrial sector particularly, we saw 2020, 2021, first half of 22, ransomware attacks were skyrocketing. Then they started to fall off a little bit. Maybe there's been a little bit of increase lately. What do you think maybe you would attribute to some of this up and down sort of trending for the quantity of ransomware attacks?
So I actually have to start by saying I don't know. I don't have like a very good reason for it, but I can think of a few things that might cause this wave pattern. My first reason is a bit of a disappointing one. Just as a data person, I look at a lot of data and it could just be a coincidence. And then we try to explain it. But there are some things which might influence attack patterns. One is holiday season. That comes to mind, like Christmas and Thanksgiving. I know that during that time, attackers focus a lot more on consumers and on payment sites because there's a lot of online ordering, and it's just a good way to make money for attackers at this time. So if we see a drop during that time, then that might be the cause.
Okay.
I don't have any other very good reasons for that.
Okay. One of the things that we've heard a lot about too is the reticence for a lot of companies to disclose that they were the victim of a ransomware attack. Do you see a lot of that coming into it? Is that frustrating as somebody who's looking at a lot of this data and maybe knowing I might not be getting the full data set here to really assess things?
So one of the things that we noticed, we have a separate research on this, is that there is a big reporting delay due to this exactly. There are many events that happened, and I don't remember how long the average delay is, but I think it's a few months that it takes companies to report an attack. But I have to say that I think for the last several months, I've seen a lot more companies acknowledging that they have been attacked by ransomware and acknowledging it pretty quickly. I think even if you look 1 year back, companies usually didn't acknowledge quickly that they suffered a cyber attack. And that was only based on rumors. And sometimes they acknowledged they suffered a cyber attack, but they didn't say a ransomware attack. It could have taken, 2 or 3 weeks at best. And now it's very quick. So that's a very good trend. It helps fight ransomware, and it helps also companies deal with the effects of a ransomware attack.
Absolutely. Are you aware of any factors that might be driving people to announce those things more quickly? I know we're seeing a lot more supply chain interlinks that maybe you have to because those impacts, if it's impacting a manufacturing facility, it's also impacting the folks delivering goods. It's impacting suppliers and so on. Is there some of that dynamic in place, or might there be other things that are in play?
So I think that's one thing. It's very hard to hide ransomware attacks if they affect enough people. So it's better for you to say you were attacked. And I think a ransomware attack can really hurt a company's reputation. Yeah. And if you're quick to announce it, I think it might actually boost your reputation and not hurt it. Again, I don't have any data to support this, but it's just based on my experience. And the second thing, which I think might be influencing this, is there is increased regulation around cyber attacks. I think that in the US, companies have to report a ransomware attack. I'm pretty sure about public companies, but I'm not sure about non-public companies. So that's something that is driving them to report for sure, because they could be fined for that.
Yeah, there's definitely regulatory efforts around those that are considered critical infrastructure when you're looking at utilities and medical facilities and things like that. And it's definitely bleeding into what we cover our audience in the industrial sector. You bring up government involvement. Do you feel like that's a positive thing? Do you think we need more of that?
I feel like it's a tricky question because I would say yes,
Yeah.
but I think the issue with government involvement in anything, not specifically for cyber, is that you don't want the government to get too involved and limit the business or the market. But I think at the level we're seeing now, where governments understand that cyber attacks are a problem and they have to be regulated in some way. I think that's a really good thing, and it's really helpful. And also, there's a lot of government agencies in the U.S., such as I can think of CISA, for example, that are helping to standardize many things that have not been standardized. Another good example of this is MITRE. I hope I'm saying it correctly. I'm not sure, but.
So I'm wondering too, Guy, when you're breaking down a lot of these ransomware attacks, did you see any specific exploits or tactics, things that were sort of repeated that people might be able to take away to help better set up their defenses?
So I think the two most common attack vectors that I saw were compromised credentials and a company having exposed internet servers exposed to the internet, which are not, I would say, are not properly secured. This could mean many different things. And the worst thing is a combination of both: having exposed credentials, for example, it could be employee credentials, and having exposed RDP or VPN servers, which you might be able to use these exposed credentials to get into them and attack the company. So that's the first thing I would look at, and I think it's not easy to solve, but I think it's relatively easy to monitor. You can know if any of your employees had credentials exposed. There's websites that do this for free. And regarding your internet exposed servers, then that's a bit harder, but you should monitor access to these servers and hopefully see any access which is strange, or any brute force attempts to try and guess passwords there.
Yeah. You mentioned, we're kind of coming back to the attackers a little bit. You mentioned them previously. Do you see them taking any new tactics or different approaches to these ransomware attacks that are maybe new? And we know they're constantly evolving, but are you seeing any new tactics that they're trying to utilize?
So one thing I was actually thinking about as I wrote the report, it's not very new, but I think it's worth mentioning. If you look probably even 2 years back, I don't think people were really thinking that ransomware actors are going to be exploiting 0 days. I mean, it did happen in the past, but it was like a really rare event. And now it's not very common, but it is becoming more common that ransomware actors are able to exploit 0 days and not 1 days, which have already been published. That a good example of that was with the MoveIt file transfer attack that happened. I think it was in June. And that was a pretty effective attack where you just use one, or actually it was several 0 days, but it was for the same software, and you can attack a lot of different users of that software.
No, the MoveIt definitely raised a lot of eyebrows in terms of how quickly the attackers were able to take advantage of that vulnerability. When we look at ransomware too, Guy, and I'd be curious, as a guy who's crunching the data, are you seeing more people paying the ransomware? Are people more reticent to pay it? Are they going through other routes? And maybe, do you have an opinion in terms of when you should or shouldn't pay the ransom?
So this research actually didn't look into ransom payments, but from the data that I was seeing that isn't in the research, it seems like people don't pay the ransom as much as they used to.
Okay.
I think it's still a pretty high payment rate. I think less than half pay the ransom, but just, I'm not sure about these numbers, but from what I remember, things that I looked at, it was around 40%.
Okay.
And if I have an opinion about this, I think that, in an ideal world, it would be best not to pay the ransom, because if enough companies didn't pay ransom, then ransomware couldn't survive, because there would just not be a reason for them to keep doing this.
Right.
But when you suffer an attack and it interrupts your business and you have to make a quick decision, sometimes it's more cost effective for you to pay the ransom and get your systems running again and hope that the attacker keeps their word and restores your files and doesn't attack you again.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of wild cards in play there if you do go that route of paying the ransom, in terms of, did we kick them out? Are they going to hit us again? Will we get our data back? All of those types of variables come into play. So, Guy, we've talked a lot about the bad guys. Let's talk about some of the good guys here. What can you tell us a little bit about Kovrr and the work that you do?
So Kovrr, the main thing that Kovrr does is quantify cyber risk. I guess on a very high level, what that means is we look at two things. We have a lot of data on cyber trends, and the ransomware report is a good example. It's like zoom into one area that we look at. That's one half. And the second half that we look at is a specific company that we're scanning right now. So we combine many details about the company infrastructure, the company technologies, industry, things like that, with the cyber trends data that we have. And then we model the risk of that company. And the most important thing is that we show risk as a dollar value, which I think is much easier to grasp than many other solutions that show cyber risk either as different risk grades or as different colors of risk. And that's for two reasons. One reason is that we all understand money. It's easy for us to quantify it. And that's how executives and board members look at other types of risk. So there's no reason for them to look at cyber risk in a different way. So that's one reason. And the second reason is that if you show risk as something that's not absolute, say as a color or as a risk level, different companies can interpret this in different ways. They could say, oh, so our orange or yellow level is, I don't know, $5 million. And another company could say it's 15 million. And they would still be seeing sort of the same result.
Sure.
And in our product, we just show it as a dollar value. So it's accurate for every company.
Interesting. I know, in your role, it's more about looking at the data that's coming in, and in this instance, specific to ransomware. But I'm just wondering, overall, when we look at cybersecurity, it's becoming more and more prominent throughout society, and especially in the industrial sector that we serve. Do you see any other big trends or things that are happening that could really impact things maybe over the next year and a half or so?
So it's very hard to predict these things. But I do have a few thoughts that I think will have started and will grow in the next year or year and a half. The first thing, and it's a buzzword and everyone's saying it, so I kind of hate saying it, but language models.
Sure.
I use them actually in my work now as a developer, and they're very helpful. And I'm pretty sure that if I use them, then malware writers can use them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can use them, first of all, to make their routine tasks quicker. They could write code with these language models. They're not going to write all of their file, but some pieces of code are simple, and they can stop writing them. or they could look for targets better. They could filter targets better with language models. So that's one thing which I think will have like a direct effect on the threat landscape. And one more thing, which we have seen for several years, but I think it's becoming more common, is attacks through third-party tools like the MoveIt attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, if you're able to get this product that many people use and you're able to exploit it, it's a very, very effective attack vector. And it can be very, very cost effective. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
For attackers to research these types of attacks. So that's as hard as it is to predict the future. I think.
No, it's interesting. You bring up a couple of things that we have talked a lot about with a lot of other experts in the field. Most recently we were talking about some of these cloud-based apps, whether it be Gmail or some of the Microsoft products, and it's very easy to upload malware in there. People don't look at it as a safe area, safe space or whatever to get information from. They don't look at the link so much, and it's very easy to get infected that way, just through something like you just kind of identified. Looking at the language models, and obviously it's getting a lot more attention due to things like ChatGPT, and that leads into conversations with AI. Do you feel like with artificial intelligence, it can be used by the bad guys, it can also be used by the good guys, right? I mean, are there some opportunities that we can leverage there from a defensive posture as well?
Yeah. I think, like, the bottom line for me at the current stage of language models is that they're very good at saving time on simple or routine tasks. So that applies to both sides. Actually, in my previous job, I worked for a cybersecurity company as a researcher, and much of the work there is analyzing malware samples and seeing if they're actually malware or not, and how they act. I think much of this can be done by language models, which can probably do the initial filtering for the researchers and save a lot of time. They can also do the same for the SOC analysts who are flooded with information.
Yeah.
And then it can help them understand which threats are more interesting than others and should be looked at first. And just like it can write code for the bad guys, it can write code for the good guys and save a lot of time. Hopefully, not getting us fired in the future.
No, great points. Guy, before we go, anything else you'd like to add or share with the audience?
I would actually like to maybe reiterate the points from the first question you asked me about what surprised me, and say that it actually did surprise me. I've been looking at ransomware for many years, and I knew there are a lot of actors, and new actors come in very often, and then some actors drop. But I didn't think that these names that we see so much in the news, that they have so much control over the threat landscape. That's just a big surprise.
Guy, thanks so much for joining us. To learn more about the work that Kovrr is doing, you can check them out at kovrr.com. That's KOVRR.com. And thank you for joining us today. To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Guy Proper, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.